Hi, everyone. Welcome for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into this session around detecting attacks against proof of work. We'll be talking about this for the next 25 minutes or so. And we is myself. My name is Gert Jaap. I work with MIT's Digital Currency Initiative. And my primary focus for the past 11 months or so has been a project called Pool Detective, which we'll be detailing more in the coming presentation. With me today is James Lovejoy. James recently graduated from MIT, and he did his master's thesis with the Digital Currency Initiative as well on the reorg tracker, which he'll be talking about in just a minute. So let me introduce the Digital Currency Initiative real quick. We're a research group based out of the MIT Media Lab, and there's three things that we do. First and foremost, obviously, we're attached to universities, so we're educators. We try to build capacity in this industry by teaching courses and also advising our students on these topics. We're also conducting research, so we contribute research and open source development addressing some of the problems that are still in the blockchain space around scalability, privacy, and also, and that's the topic of this talk, security. And obviously having a strong brand and a history of standard setting and a neutral platform are also good conveners. So let's introduce the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to start with James, who's going to introduce you to the reorg tracker, which is a system that detects chain reorganizations and double spends. And then it's my turn to talk to you about Pool Detective, and what Pool Detective is and does. Is it records and analyzes the behavior of cryptocurrency mining pools. So first off, we're going to hand it off to James to talk you through the reorg tracker. James.
Okay, thanks for that, Yap. So what we're talking about today is the reorg tracker, which was my master's thesis project this last year at the DCI. What it's dealing with is studying 51% attacks. Now, proof of work has been around as a consensus algorithm for just over 10 years now, first used in Bitcoin, but now used in many of the coins across the industry. And if you read Satoshi's white paper, his security argument is pretty hand-wavy. He essentially says that, 51% attacks should be impractical, and really a miner should not want to do it. But more recently, economic researchers have been looking into, well, if we take miners from a rational economic perspective, is that really true? And ultimately, the current theory says that actually, 51% attacks should be far from impossible. It says that they should be cheap. And it comes down to this theory from microeconomics, which states that at market equilibrium, the marginal cost becomes equal to the marginal revenue. And what this means for proof of work is that the cost of a reorg should equal the value of the block rewards from doing that reorg. So at market equilibrium, hash rate is abundant and miner profit is eliminated, meaning that an adversary could break even without even having to double spend. And this was introduced in actually 3 separate papers, one by Eric Budish, one by Hasu and a few others, and one by Raphael Auer. So naturally we wanted to study these because we wanted to see, how does the theory hold up in practice? And it seems that, for coins with a very small network hash rate, there's actually plenty of hash rate available for rent. This is because lots of coins share mining algorithms. So if there's a large coin and then several smaller coins, often only a very small percentage of the network hash rate has to shift from one coin to another in order to be 51% or even 100% of that network's hash rate. Additionally, sort of new players in the game, such as NiceHash, have created a rental market, meaning that it's actually possible for an adversary or anyone to only have to pay the marginal cost of their hash rate. They don't have to worry about the fixed costs or maintaining mining hardware, making attacking far more practical. And coins have been attacked in practice and money has been stolen. And this is sort of an excerpt from some of the news articles that came out before we performed this research, suggesting that a number of coins, Vertcoin, Verge, Ethereum Classic, Bitcoin Gold, have all been 51% attacked. One of these articles even calls the 51% attack rare. So we wanted to see, how true is this? Are they rare or not? So which coins actually exist in a liquid hash rate market? It turns out quite a lot. Over half of the coins that we studied are actually existing in such a market right now, where the black line in the middle represents 100% of that coin's network hash rate. So for more than 50% of the coins, there's far more than 100% of their network hash rate available for rent on NiceHash. And in the worst case, with Expanse, there's over 1,000 times that coin's network hash rate available for rent at any one time. So why do we need a reorg tracker? Well, these events, they're transient. So people often say, well, can't you see the attack in the blockchain? And the answer is no. You need an active observer to be monitoring the network to check whether or not an attack occurs. Also, up until now, we've been reliant on victims to tell us about whether they've been attacked. And as you can imagine, if this results in insolvency or a loss of user funds, victims are often not super interested in revealing an attack has taken place. We also wanted to see if we can demonstrate that 51% attacks are a real risk to the market and quantify how much these attacks cost and try and calculate realistic confirmation requirements that exchanges should be using for these coins. We also wanted to investigate whether there are any mitigation strategies that coins could use to try and protect themselves against attacks. So what are we detecting here? In the normal operation of a blockchain, the subsequent blocks refer to a single previous block, and the chain is extended contiguously. But in the case of a reorg, one set of blocks and another set of blocks both reference the same fork block, and one set of blocks can be replaced by the other when one set of blocks has a higher total work than the other one. So what an attacker might want to do is include a transaction in the original set of blocks that deposits to an exchange. Then once that exchange has credited the deposit, they reveal a second set of blocks that replaces their deposit transaction and in fact makes it invalid, such that the exchange cannot later include that deposit transaction in subsequent blocks. So the attacker is able to keep both their deposit and whatever coins they had on the exchange, which they can then withdraw or exchange for coins. So what did we do? We ran coin daemons for 21 different proof-of-work cryptocurrencies. And we also tracked Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, for which we used remote APIs. And then we tracked reorgs on each of these coins for a period of 10 months. And then correlated the attack events we discovered with market data from NiceHash and price data from CryptoCompare. So this is a block diagram of our system design. Essentially what we had is all of the coin daemons or web APIs for the different coins responsible for talking to those coins peer-to-peer networks, and then tracker processes for each of the coins which determined whether or not a reorg was taking place. And if a reorg had taken place, it saved both the original set of blocks, the replacement set of blocks, and the fork block to a database for later analysis for double-spent transactions. So what did we find? Well, we found that attacks do certainly happen. And in the worst case on Vertcoin, we detected an attack that was 600 blocks deep, which is the equivalent of over 24 hours worth of blocks being removed from the primary chain, which, as you can imagine, is pretty catastrophic, and lots more than the 6 blocks that most people tend to think about when they think about Bitcoin, at least. Additionally, we were able to compare does the marginal cost actually equal marginal revenue in practice? And what we found is, at least within sort of one order of magnitude, that certainly seems to be the case. And that, using the block reward as a proxy for the cost of a reorg seems to be a pretty accurate estimation. There are certainly some outliers which can be explained, but that's out of the scope of this talk. So in terms of, the attacks we discovered, we detected attacks on a number of different coins, which included double spends. As you can see, the sort of deepest reorg there is sort of 25 hours worth of blocks being removed on Bitcoin, as well as on Bitcoin Gold. You can see the cumulative amount of double spent value reaching over $500,000 in the end. So certainly a significant amount of money is at stake here. Additionally, we found strong evidence that NiceHash is being used by adversaries to launch attacks. We were actually forewarned of the attack on Vertcoin before it was deployed, because a miner discovered that they were being provided work by NiceHash to mine on Vertcoin for secret blocks. And additionally, when we observed the market conditions on NiceHash during the time of the attack, we found that there was a pretty large spike in available hash rate capacity as well as price, coinciding with the start of the attack and the end of the attack, i.e. when we believed the attack was starting to be generated and when the end of the attack was deployed, i.e. the blocks were revealed to the network. Additionally, we discovered counterattacks. So the deep reorgs that occurred on Bitcoin Gold included repeated counterattacks. So what happens is a defender, after the attacker had revealed their blocks, showed up and extended the original fork to displace the attacker's fork. The adversary then responded by extending their malicious fork to once again restore their malicious fork to the primary chain. And finally, the defender once again extended the original fork, restoring the original fork to the primary chain and thwarting the attack. And this confirms a theory that was developed at the DCI by a Harvard student, Dan Morose, that states that counterattacks really should deter attacking in the first place once there's a credible threat of a counterattack. We also looked into how asset prices change after an attack. There's a lot of folklore in the space that suggests that, post-attack, it would be catastrophic for the coin's reputation, and thus the price of that coin would decrease significantly. But we found that often that's not the case, or at least it's not the case within a short period of time after the attack, at least giving the attacker enough time to withdraw their funds and make a profit on their attack. In fact, for one of the attacks on Expanse, the attack coincided with a large exchange pump where the price of that asset increased over 7 times, meaning that the attack was incredibly profitable for the attacker, even without including any double spends. So in terms of future work, it'd be really great to deploy the reorg tracker as a commercial product. Right now, it's just a research tool. It's not really suitable for sort of mass usage, but clearly, given that these attacks are becoming more and more frequent and lots of money is at stake, it's clearly required that some kind of monitoring is needed. Additionally, we don't know who the attacker and the victims were, so it's important to try and find that out, because if it's exchanges that are being attacked and they're losing user funds, it's important for users to be aware of that. Secondly, we need to be able to interpret state changes between forks in account-based coins. Assuming an attack one day happens on an account-based coin, there are a lot more complex interactions between different contracts, so it's much harder than just seeing which outputs are double spent between different coins. And finally, given that we've seen that counterattacking is potentially a method to sort of prevent these attacks from occurring, we want to be able to implement an automated counterattack system for vulnerable coins so that they can defend themselves in the event of an attack. Thanks, over to Haya.
Thanks, James. Okay, so let's talk about the pool detective. And before we start to talk about pool detective, let's talk about pool mining. So when you buy a state-of-the-art Bitcoin miner, the beauty of the Bitcoin network is that you can run a Bitcoin full node, install a little bit of software, and then be mining on the Bitcoin blockchain all by yourself. Now the problem with this approach, however, is that due to the vast amount of computational capacity that the Bitcoin network currently has, your state-of-the-art Bitcoin miner will probably take somewhere between 20 and 30 years to find a block. All of which time you'll have to like pay the electric bill for running the miner. And so this is a real problem for miners, which they solved by introducing mining pools. And what mining pools do is they distribute the work that needs to be done to find a block over a large population of miners that therewith share in the workload. But once the mining pool has found a valid proof of work, they also share in the rewards. So what a mining pool does for a miner is, instead of waiting really long for a really big payout, they receive very small payouts much more frequently. And so it reduces the variance of the rewards. And what the pool does in this perspective is they coordinate the work, meaning that they will ensure that no two miners do the same work, because that's obviously wasteful. And once the block reward is received, the mining pool will custody that reward and will then account for which miner did which amount of work and distribute the rewards based on each of the miners' individual contribution to the total pool resources. And these mining pools communicate with miners using a protocol that is called Straddle. Now, to illustrate the power that mining pools have, I'm going to show you this pie chart that shows the distribution of hash rate amongst pools. And what you can see here is that the 8 largest pools on the Bitcoin network control 80% of the hash power that is active on the network. And so that means that 8 entities, be it persons or companies, control what 80% of all these mining hardware is working on. And that gives them a fairly serious amount of control. Because mining hardware is really, really efficient at running proof of work functions, so doing hash functions really efficiently, cranking out as much of these proof of work functions as possible for the lowest amount of energy possible. But what these devices cannot do is validate whether the work they receive is actually the work that they want to work on. So they cannot do any analysis on the work they receive. And that's a problem in the sense that this risks the mining hardware doing whatever the mining pool tells it to do. So if the mining pool gives the miner work that it doesn't expect, then the mining hardware is going to execute that job regardless. And so what Pool Detective aims to do, and we started this project about 11 months ago, is we're positioning ourselves between the pool and the mining hardware, and we record what the mining pool is telling the miner. At the same time, we also position ourselves in the peer-to-peer network of the cryptocurrencies that we monitor in order to see the moment at which new blocks are found by listening to the peers announce blocks to each other. And then we store all this data in a large database and we analyze this data for unexpected behavior. And when I talk about unexpected behavior, what we look for are these 5 things that we set out when we started the project. First of all, we look for evidence of selfish mining. And in selfish mining, a mining pool will tell the miners that are mining on that pool about a block that they found, and they will start looking for the next block, but they will not announce the same block to the other peers. And the problem there is that the mining pool will have an unfair advantage in finding the next block because essentially he has a monopoly on that, given that he's the only one knowing about the block. And research shows that this gives the mining pool an unfair advantage, making them receive more rewards than they would when they would be mining honestly. So we want to look for evidence of this, and so far we haven't found any evidence of this, but we're still looking. Another thing is because the devices, the mining hardware, is incapable of determining whether the work it receives is of a valid chain, of the chain it expects, a mining pool can send work for another chain that uses the same proof of work function. For instance, if you're mining on a Bitcoin pool, you could receive work for Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin SV, and your mining hardware will simply execute it because there's no way for the mining hardware to tell that that's happening. And we found one instance, we found one pool that is sending us Bitcoin Cash and SV work when we expected Bitcoin work. We're currently waiting for that pool to respond to our findings, and then we're going to make a publication about this somewhere in the next few weeks. Another thing that mining pools can do is once they switch from one block to the other, the first thing that they can do that they're sure is valid is mining a empty block on top of the one that another pool found. So before they have been able to validate the block, they can mine an empty block. The problem is if they do this for too long, the risk of finding an empty block is higher, meaning that the total average throughput of the network will decrease because an empty block takes out potential transaction capacity. And so we want to compare how empty blocks are being served as work by the different pools, whether they all do it the same way, whether pools are really slow in switching from an empty block to a full block, but it's still going on. Another, a little bit more out there, is mining pools are able to conceal their true hash rate by sending miners work for a block that pays to an unknown address. So the pie chart that I showed earlier attributes blocks to mining pools by looking at which address they pay out to, or for instance, marker data somewhere in the reward transaction. And a mining pool could simply use a different payout address that is unknown, meaning that the mining pool's hash rate for that part of the work will show up as unknown, meaning that nobody is able to tell what their true hash rate is. Because mining pools are meant to not have a too large share of the network, while at the same time having a higher share means higher income for the pool. So it might be a possibility that they're doing this, so we're looking for that. The last one is about underpaying miners. So if you send a particular amount of work, you expect a particular amount of payout. But so far we've concluded that it's hard to determine whether mining pools underpay miners because you need more data than the data that we have observed. You need the data that the mining pool has about the other miners. And so far we haven't been able to draw any conclusions on that front. So very, very basic how the system is designed. The core of the system is a reverse Straddle proxy, where instead of having one pool and you distribute the work to multiple miners, which would be a normal Straddle proxy, you can it's a reverse proxy where we connect to a bunch of upstream pools and we distribute the work to a single miner that we have. And so we have a single miner for each of the algorithms that we monitor, and we make it do the work of multiple pools at the same time. Another thing that we have is a modified full node software that allows us to monitor what happens on the peer-to-peer network in terms of block propagation. So we can see when blocks are discovered, and we can see when the work to build on top of that block is received, so we can detect things like selfish mining. In order to detect when blocks are found more accurately, we're also running this software on 5 different places on the globe to make sure that we're close and connected to the full nodes that find the blocks, or are close to the full nodes that find the blocks, meaning that we're learning about the blocks as fast as we can. Now, this system has been running since November 1st. We're currently monitoring 31 pools on 11 cryptocurrencies. This number is ever increasing. So we're looking at which pools are important in certain currencies, and we're adding new pools as we go. These are the pools that we're monitoring for Bitcoin, which covers about 92% of the Bitcoin hash rate, which is significant and important to have a large share in that. There's 10 altcoins. Also here there are coins that share the proof of work algorithm, which might allow us to uncover when pools send wrong but compatible work. And another aspect is including rental markets. So what James said around rental markets being used for attacks, if we mine on the rental markets as well, we can see the work on blocks that ends up in an attacker chain, and combined with the price data, that would be a smoking gun to these markets being used for attacks. So currently we're analyzing for selfish mining, the timing of empty blocks, and whether we can relate work to blocks reliably without having to rely on a known list of addresses per pool. And we're also building an API to expose this data to the public for other people to build on. So the next steps for us are, we're going to expand this API. We'll be releasing a blog post soon to introduce this project in more detail, which you can obviously read more about it. We're releasing a YouTube video on the pool detective to explain it in more detail. And maybe we're releasing also a public front end for people to explore this data. Now, if you want to learn more about the pool detective or the reorg tracker, you can visit the website of the DCI, which is dci.mit.edu. Also, if you want to learn more about the DCI in general, that's a great place to start. And you can follow us on Twitter, either the DCI account or me personally or James personally. And with that, we're wrapping up. So thank you for watching this presentation. If you want to learn more, please feel free to visit the website or contact us on Twitter. Thank you.